Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and welcome to the March Adobe Video Community Meetup, where today we're going to be talking about motion graphics templates, and specifically a new feature that was just added to the MOGRT world, media replacement. And we've got two members of the Adobe family joining us today, as well as a very special guest, a motion designer who not only created some amazing MOGRTs for us, but is going to talk about that process and the journey and how maybe to inspire you to start building some of your own motion graphics templates, all of which, of course, can be shared via Adobe Stock and then shared with Premiere Pro and the editors that you're working with. As always, we're coming to you live on YouTube and Facebook, so I want to give a couple quick shout outs to everybody. I see we've got Cassandra Guria in there, Rockabirdie, and Yost and Eric. Great to see you all. Thank you so much. And over on Facebook, we've got Anais and Luis Fernando and Ahmad and Donna, all right, and Lamel and James and Peter and Juan Hu and Nico and Fabio and Santosh and David and so many more. But we don't have endless time today, so we want to get to everything. So we're going to start with a quick preview video that actually our good friend and yours, Dacia, put together about this new media replacement feature with motion graphics templates. Let's go ahead and roll the video.
I'm super excited to introduce a new feature that we've got called media replacement in both AE MOGRTs and Essential Graphics in After Effects. So here we've got a title for a really awesome show called Pet Wars. But guess what? Maybe I've got a different show and I'd like to iterate on this same design. Well, now it's possible to grab any layer with media or image, a comp even, and put it in your Essential Graphics panel and make this layer something that is replaceable, that you can add new media to, swap out logos, essentially just create completely new content without having to redesign everything over and over again. Instead, with just a few simple clicks, I can create unique designs using essential properties in the timeline. And now you can even swap media out. Simply drag and drop new media over the control in the timeline, and then double click on that to add effects, to key out footage, to basically make any custom changes you want to that footage. And now here, for my new show, Space Rocks, I'm ready to roll with my new title with just a few simple steps. Using essential properties allows you to create multiple versions quickly and easily. And now with media replacement, swapping out different content to see maybe if you want a different look, a different style is super easy. Here I've got a second version of my Space Rocks intro, and guess what? I think I like it better. Get it, spaceman, work it. Woo! But we didn't stop there, folks. You can also use these in traditional After Effects MOGRT workflows. So here, again, just grabbing an image layer, dragging and dropping it into my After Effects EGP Essential Graphics panel. I export this. I can choose where I want to export it to, and then boom, now I'm in Premiere. I've got this cool little VHS effects look that I want to be able to add any footage to and basically have the kind of effects and power and control from After Effects without having to leave Premiere. So I can then just drag and drop my media from the project panel. You can also just drag it directly from Finder or Explorer, and then boom, just like that, that footage is being powered by After Effects with the magic and look of it all. Here's another example where we have some compositing looks that, we might need to add some effects on within Premiere itself. It's so easy. You just have to double click on that thumbnail in the EGP. It opens up a nested sequence where you can add whatever effects that you're looking for, manipulate your footage, edit in that timeline, direct manipulation, scale it up, position it up, go back to your regular timeline, and boom. You've got the magic of After Effects right inside Premiere. I hope you guys enjoy and have a lot of fun.
All right, that was awesome. Well, my friends, joining me today, we have two very special guests from the Adobe team. From the quality engineering team for motion graphics, we've got Dacia Saenz. How are you, Dacia?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Great to see you again. Gosh, it's been almost a year.
I can't believe it.
It's hard to believe. And from the After Effects team, we've got Senior After Effects Product Manager, Victoria Nece. Victoria, thank you so much for joining me today. It's so great to see you both.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of cool stuff to talk about, and this was really one of our most anticipated features in After Effects and these kind of monthly releases that we're doing. So wanted to kind of get into, and I thought maybe we could start with a little bit of an origin story, Victoria or Dacia. You guys can jump in where you feel free, but maybe kind of give some of the viewers who are not as familiar with MOGRTs, which of course stands for Motion Graphics Templates, kind of what the what the impetus was for kind of creating this new thing in After Effects, which ultimately is meant to serve Premiere Pro and editors. But maybe you could give kind of a little bit of backstory around that and kind of what it is that we're going to be talking about today and why media replacement is so crucial to like a video editing workflow.
Yeah, so this is something we've been wanting to build for a long time, and media replacement in particular has been the #1 user request for several years. But the origin story here is interesting in that it's not just about the editorial workflow. It's also that the motion designers want control over the designs. They want to say, this is our brand, this is our look, this is what we want you to be able to change. And there's also stuff we don't want you to be able to change. So you have some flexibility in the edit. You want to be able to make those creative decisions right in your timeline, but you want to be able to trust that someone you hand this template to is going to be able to create something that's going to stay on brand, that's going to look good, and you don't have to worry about that. So it gives you that flexibility, that balance of both the control for the author and flexibility for the editor. But where this all came from earlier and earlier, there used to be a feature called live text templates where you could bring in an After Effects project via dynamic link and just change the type in it. That was the only thing you could change.
And that was a big deal. I remember showing that on stage, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a big deal to not have to go back and re-render a lower third every time there was a typo. So, I mean, let's shout out. Pour one out for live text templates.
Yeah, LTT. That's right.
It was a big deal back in the day. And then we said, well, you know what? People want to change more than just text. And people had started hacking the live text template format to do amazing stuff where they were using text and expressions on hidden text layers to drive color changes and shifts and change position. And it started to turn into a thing where we said people need more control in the Premiere timeline.
Right.
And then the other piece of it is that it also packs up all your assets. So you don't have to worry about relinking, managing all your files. You just have everything in one convenient package. So really streamlining that interchange workflow. So that was 2017. I think.
Yeah, I think so. 2017, 2016. I think the other thing I really love about the MOGRT origin story, why I got really into it, is the idea of accessibility of having a more advanced After Effects user be able to go in and curate a set of tools for you. You know, I know everyone I ever meet wants to go into After Effects, and yet they feel overwhelmed or don't know where to start. And so a motion graphics template gives you this opportunity to play with, you know, have the power and wizardry of After Effects, but in an environment where you already feel comfortable and safe. And so that's one of my favorite parts of what the power of MOGRTs can give, is just opening up that creative expression and giving you a little taste of After Effects to get going.
And I love, and you kind of touched upon this, both of you, talking about sort of branding. You know, one of the other brilliant things, not only the fact that it's sort of packaging up everything for you when you create the MOGRT, but just in terms of fonts, right? In particular, if you use Adobe fonts, I think one of the greatest things about the MOGRT is it will always display correctly for anyone who's reading that in Premiere, right? If they're a CC user, they bring in a MOGRT, maybe they don't have. One of my favorite fonts right now is Fat Frank. I just love that font. I don't know if those thicker fonts. Yeah, it's a good one. I don't know if
I like that
fonts
one.
are still in, but I love that one. You know, I'm really a Futura person mostly, but Fat Frank is awesome. And no matter what, whether my co-editor has that installed on their machine, they grab the MOGRT, it will automatically, download, license that file. We don't have any limitations on fonts. And again, in terms of preserving that branding, that look, that's one thing you don't have to think about, which you kind of did have to think about even in the LTT days and before, people are using custom fonts and things. It can get really confusing. We just make it easy so that you're always kind of on brand. Again, like you were saying, Dacia, you can set a range of colors that people can use to affect part of the MOGRT or whatever it is to keep things on brand, to keep the look consistent and to keep that consistent across your organization. And all of this lives effectively in your essential graphics panel and in your libraries. So again, it's not only can you save out those MOGRTs and share them independently, but something I always love to emphasize, CC libraries, right? Save it to a shared library. Everybody on your team has instant access and instant ability to work with these things and use them in whatever they're doing.
Absolutely. And, we do have a lot of usability and functionality in that EGP to work with these. So even if someone has shared MOGRTs via a CC library, you can always save them locally and access them on your local machine. But these things are so flexible. You can Slack them, you can email them, you can they're just a contained little morsel of After Effects magic, and they're awesome. I love them.
So now I wanted to ask this of you, Dacia and Victoria. I apologize. I hope this is okay that I'm mentioning this. You can scold me, but something that I've talked about on stream before, and I think this is kind of somewhat known, but you can also reopen the original MOGRT in After Effects as a project, and the key is open project, not file import. Maybe you could kind of talk a bit about that and why we allow for that, because that's really interesting. And we'll talk a bit about this with Jake when he comes up later, but for someone who's starting out in motion design or trying to figure out After Effects, being able to kind of unlock what's in that MOGRT, especially when using the essential properties, right, is an amazing way to learn how After Effects is working and how these things are authored.
That's a great point. And it really is as simple as opening it up, go to Project Open, and you can unpack it. That's the reason you can't import them. Secretly under the hood, MOGRTs are just zip files. I think I'm allowed to say that publicly.
Okay, better you than me. Okay.
Zip files. And so when you open it, we need a place to put your assets, put everything that's inside that project, and make sure that you have a source location for all of those graphics. And so that's why it's an open-in After Effects process and not something you can just import as a single package. And then Premiere's doing the same thing behind the scenes. So that's all it really is a zip file with your project and your assets and your controls in it and a few extra little goodies.
And you could manually, change the extension from .mogrt to .zip, and but it's really what a lot of people know how to do. But it's a pain to do that. You don't have to. Just file open. You'll get a dialog that says, "Where do you want me to extract this to?" And you do that, and then it's just magic under there. I've learned so many different techniques. After Effects is such a rich and deep tool. There are a million ways to do everything. And it's really fascinating to see how one person might tackle a particular motion design challenge versus another. And it is just a really great learning tool in addition.
And there's so many free ones.
Yeah, there's so many free ones to look up. The other thing that's in the EGP there that's wonderful is the stock tab. You've got your My Templates view. And then if you just click over to stock, you can just literally drag and drop a ton of free content, a lot of really cool templates with really cool looks, and get inspired and figure out how little tips and tricks to figure out and form your next project too.
And that's so true. And I mean, and this is everything from, even like using basic expressions, right, to using different types of controls or native effects in After Effects that you may not have otherwise figured out or kind of ever really cracked. You'll be able to see all of those things. And something else that I thought was really cool, and which we, again, I try and talk about as much as possible, is that not only from the authoring standpoint, but again, if you think about like the editor who just wants the ability to drag something in and start working with it, the fact that you can break this down to all of its original elements, essentially anything, and maybe again, Victoria and Dacia, you can tell me, but effectively anything that you can do in After Effects can be in a MOGRT.
Absolutely.
Period. Right. So anything. It can be 3D stuff. It can be animated text. It can all these crazy expressions. All of these things can be put in that MOGRT and then can be handed off and used on the editing side with, your controlled parameter modification. But I don't think people realize that enough. Like you can do this. You can package this up and save these animations and share them with anyone for anything. We talk about, like, again, you talked about the Adobe Stock Free tab or Stock tab where you can sort between free and premium. There's great free stuff. And I say this all the time. And anyone who watches me knows, I don't say things that I don't believe in. And I'll tell you when the free ones are, less than stellar. We have some really stellar
ones. They're good.
Free
it's really good stuff.
And it's constantly being updated. This, as I watch myself right now, I'm going, wow, that's coming off a little salesy, and it is, but it's also, we're updating those all the time. Like that was the promise of MOGRTs. And anyone who goes into Premiere, go into stock, check free, and you're going to see, and they're seasonal too. You'll see things around Halloween. I noticed this past year because it was around Max timeframe, all kinds of Halloween MOGRTs, same holiday. You're starting to see all these holiday themed MOGRTs, Valentine's Day, if you're into all this stuff, seeing lots of things with hearts and love and everything else. And we're really constantly adding to the free offering as well, which I think is, again, just a great way to get people in and to start exploring and start to kind of break the fear of creating motion graphic stuff in After Effects.
Yeah. And one of the things, that I think why I'm so pumped about media replacement is that you can essentially create an effects package, almost like an effects plugin for Premiere. using the native After Effects tools. You know, oftentimes there's a lot of plugins that you have to buy extra, and a lot of these extra tools that end up costing money. And the thing is, if you look at a lot of the social content that's going up, people are using effects, people are using the ones that are available on TikTok and Instagram. But after a while, your content starts to look like everyone else's, right? Because like you only have this sort of preset library of effects. One of the things I'm really excited to see folks do with this media replacement tool is to create some really cool looks. And then what you're able to do is give the end user, you know, some tools to be able to customize and make their content look super unique, and yet have this sort of like creative extra edge. You know, I kind of keep thinking of like music videos and you know, just like the sort of creative edges that we can push in social content in particular that is different than what maybe a broadcaster might be doing. I just think that there's just a lot of creative potential here with media replacement and in bringing that After Effects power straight into Premiere. And I'm super excited to see what y'all create.
The cool thing is that you can really just make stuff your own in a way that, because you can insert your own media, because you can finally include images and video, and in Premiere, whole sequences. You can also use essential properties in After Effects and even swap out entire comps. So you can get really crazy with your project structure. But it also means that you can have stuff created by the best motion designers in the world. You have access to it, and you can make it yours and really make it truly part of your brand and your visuals. And that's something I'm really excited about, is seeing that sort of explosion of motion design spreading to people for whom After Effects is a little bit, like we said, some people are a little bit intimidated by it. And this gives you the access right in your timeline.
Yeah, I love that. And you were saying earlier before we started, you know, typically we hear the story, I started in Photoshop, went to After Effects, or I started in Illustrator, I went to After Effects. We don't too often hear, I started in After Effects, right?
Yeah, it's really true.
And it's because, and it's funny because when you think of the transitions from those design apps to motion graphics, part of it is, well, yes, we have a lot of shared tools. I mean, especially today, right? There's a lot of shared tools and concepts and techniques between all the apps that make it easier. But something like motion graphics templates, and more specifically, I know Victoria and you and I have talked about this, the essential properties, essential graphics panel in After Effects it's its own tutorial, right? I mean, especially if you're opening up a pre-existing MOGRT, it really lets you see what parameters do what, how they can be controlled, how you can constrain those controls. And, you know, as someone who I've said for years, my very first After Effects teacher was the goddess herself, Angie Taylor, circa 2002.
Yeah, Angie's amazing.
Yeah,
Angie's the best.
And Angie's all about NFTs and digital art now too. But she's awesome. She sat me down. I remember we were doing a show in London, and she was like, "Okay, I'm going to teach you the concept of keyframing." And she did that. You know, she's very animated. And she did this where she's like, "Okay, so you have this one frame, and then you go over here, and there's another frame, and those are the key frames, and then you got all the stuff in between, and those were done by tweeners." And then we're going to, you know, and she kind of took me through this whole process. I feel like Essential Graphics kind of gives you that same sort of step-by-step where you can really break down visually and easily what things are doing. And again, another great part of our UX for that feature, shout out to our UX team and UI team who are making that stuff happen, solo supported properties. So, you know, and which we didn't have in the very beginning, right? I can't remember if that was initially implemented.
I think
was that a V1? Okay.
Yeah, we had that V1.
It was just only like 4 things worked.
Okay, that's what it, that's what it was. It was very minimal.
It only soloed like 2 things.
Right.
That's why we built that.
Right. Solo supported property and the other property. Right. But now when you do it, I mean, it's so eye-opening because then you really get the breadth and concept of what this thing can do. And again, just how much of what, as a motion designer, you're already building that can be packaged and reused. And for anyone, you mentioned like going into, you know, whether it's broadcast or Netflix or even, you know, a YouTube channel that's just doing a lot of production, you're reusing graphics, you're reusing video, you're reusing a lot of elements, and you're needing to swap those out based on each new episode. This media replacement thing is it's massive on so many levels, right? I think this is it's a door opener for so many in the industry.
This is perfect for those Swiss Army knife creators out there, as I like to call them. You know, I was one of those people back in the day, and it's very time consuming to be having to be in charge of every part of that pipeline, especially once you get that client feedback or you've got to go make changes and then start all over from the top. This is a game changer in saving time. And I just feel like if we can reduce the time it takes to do the redundant things or the things that are sort of annoying, then we have more mental capacity and time to focus on the creative parts about it. And that to me is one of the biggest pluses of this MOGRT workflow for sure.
I love that. So Mohammed Mullah was asking, so now again, talking about being able to put anything into a MOGRT, he was asking specifically about, can an OBJ file be put into a MOGRT? And I think really the answer to that question is, well, if you've got, again, 3D objects as part of your After Effects comp, that can exist. Yeah, go ahead and answer that, Dacia.
I believe if you're using the Cinema 4D renderer and you're using Cinema 4D Lite, that basically that's the way that there's a smaller version of Cinema 4D inside of After Effects. You can use that. It's going to make your MOGRT a dynamic link MOGRT, which means in order to use that, you have to have After Effects installed as well.
Right.
Most MOGRTs, if you're not using Cinema 4D or there's a list of effects that are not compatible with what I like to call Tiny Inception AE, which is packaged into Premiere. Tiny Inception AE is what's really running most of the show for the most part for most MOGRTs, and it does not require you to have an After Effects license installed. So that's, I think, probably one of the only things to note is that there are certain functionalities that require After Effects proper to be on, and it might make things a little bit slower. I mean, when you're working with 3D content, right. You know, you're extruding text, you're doing some wild things like that, then you should expect to have a few more cups of coffee while you wait for things to render, but it should work.
Well, and what I like to say about that too is, if you were creating it on the After Effects side natively without thinking about a MOGRT, I mean, you're kind of in that same, the experience is essentially this in terms of yes, there's some rendering that needs to happen. It's kind of the same, right? I mean, the main question that people are always asking is, if I do have a heavier MOGRT that maybe has, again, just a lot of different native After Effects and things that, yes, take a minute to just preview anyway. On the Premiere side, do I need a specifically beefy machine to do that? Or, you know, does it kind of work if I were just working in After Effects natively? And generally the answer is the experience is kind of the same, right? I mean, you're scrubbing through your timeline in Premiere to cache those frames. It'll start to play in real time, right? There's a little more waiting involved perhaps, but it's not too dissimilar from what you'd experience on the After Effects side in general.
Yeah, it's pretty similar, and it opens up one of the biggest limitations with the version of, so we build a version of After Effects inside of Premiere Pro. Right. One of the biggest limitations here is actually third-party effects. Right. So that's one of the things that you need a full version of After Effects in order to use those. But when you go to export, it'll show you if there's anything in your project that is going to require dynamic link, or whether you can render natively. If you don't see a pop-up that says, hey, there's something here that's going to mean you need dynamic link, then you're good to go. So you can actually check as you're exporting and decide, maybe I want to pre-render this thing. Maybe I'm handing this off to 200 editors who only have Premiere Pro installed. And so pre-rendering is also a really good solution, because if you're never going to change that background animation, just render it out. Just pre-render that so you don't need to reprocess it every time. So there's a lot of things you can do to speed up processing.
And just on that, could you both confirm as well? So the file size limitation for the MOGRT, I always forget if it's 1 gig or 2 gigs.
1 gig in libraries, 4 gigs on your local system. And if you have a 4 gig MOGRT, goodness, what have you done? Right, exactly. Well,
yeah. Okay, so I will say,
it's possible.
I'm guilty. I made a bunch of really giant MOGRTs because of media replacement. You know, now you're able to just drop a whole video in there, and I've had a lot of 4K video of dolphins from a trip to Hawaii a while back, and I was obsessed since we've been in lockdown. I was like, this is what I was working with, pretending I was on an adventure. And let me tell you, the thing about After Effects that it brings you bring your 10-minute clip in, and even though your comp's only 10 seconds long, After Effects doesn't cut that for you. It's not like Premiere. You're not splicing it. It's going to actually package up that entire 10-minute clip. So a couple pro tips. Bring your content in a little bit closer to the length of time that you want.
Some handles, but mostly trimmed, probably.
Yeah, mostly already trimmed. Or we did also include, if you right-click on the media replacement control in the Essential Graphics panel, you can actually replace that layer that you've used for your control, and it will become a PNG. So an image instead. Right. And so we sort of do an alt replace there so that you don't end up bloating your MOGRT with all of this extra footage that you might not need, especially if it's something you need to send an email where there's limits, things like that. You know, you can just essentially replace it with an image, and then that becomes sort of a placeholder more than anything. Right. But I like that feature a lot. It saved me a lot of time.
Yeah. And that's an awesome tip. And like you said, and I've talked about this a lot. I remember, a couple times, various people have asked about the file size, and it's no different from Photoshop files. I mean, sure, you can be working with multi-gig sized Photoshop files, and many do, especially if you're doing, massive layouts and things. But on the motion graphics side, especially, right? I mean, yeah, the media is already heavy, adding that to a motion graphics template, you just have to expect that file sizes could inflate. So there's lots of good practices around kind of minimizing that. One of them is cutting down that, like you said, that 10-minute video to the 10 seconds that you actually require for the MOGRT. Add 2 seconds of handles on either side, or 5 even. But yeah, don't give yourself the pain if you're wondering why it's suddenly 4 gigs. Those are great tips. So listen, we're just about at the half-hour mark here, and we've got our guest Jake Bartlett coming up. He is a motion designer and online instructor, and he's created an awesome video for us to showcase some of his MOGRTs using media replacement. So before we bring Jake on, let's take a look at Jake Bartlett's video.
All right, so let's take a look at this multi-style logo reveal MOGRT that I designed using the media replacement feature. I think it's a very exciting feature for a lot of different reasons, but let me just walk you through this for a little bit. First of all, I have 3 different styles of a logo reveal. They all have the same timing, but that intro animation is very different for all 3. So I've got this original, very colorful version. If I go into my global controls under the Essential Graphics panel, I've set up all these controls so that I can just switch the style to cutout. This is something that just looks a little bit more like paper, or a recessed looking version of the logo, but again, it has the same timing. And then finally, I have this one that I called vector. Again, the same timing, the animation has the same vibe, but the style, the design of the graphics themselves are completely different. So this template maybe could be used by a YouTuber who wants to present their logo at the beginning of one of their videos in a different way for every video. That is one possibility, but it's also just giving whoever downloads this template the ability to just swap between styles or choose one that they like best. But what's so great about this whole system for me is I can work the same way that I always have regarding an animation of a logo animation reveal in this case. I can treat it just like a motion design project inside of After Effects and animate it however I want, and then to turn it into something that an editor who has no knowledge of After Effects or very little knowledge of After Effects, they can then take that template, that MOGRT, into Premiere, never once open After Effects, and then drag and drop their logo or whatever graphic they want into the template, and it will automatically update. And I can even do that right here in After Effects to show you what I mean. So let me go into my pre-comps, and there is a logo source comp. So right in here is the placeholder logo, but whatever goes into this comp is what will be replaced inside of the media replacement feature. So if I just hide that layer and I bring in my logo, my little face logo, and then go back into my main comp, you see that it automatically updates just like that. Now, this is nothing new to you if you're used to working in After Effects. If you replace the contents of a pre-comp, anywhere you use that pre-comp, it's going to update. But what's so great about that is that now I can turn this into a template. Like I said, give it to the editor. They never have to go into After Effects, and they can put in whatever logo they want. Anyone can download this template and start using it right away, and it'll just work. And I can go again and change the global controls, change this back back to the wavy look and it's going to update. I can go inside and swap it out for my text version of my logo just to make sure that the text looks okay. And that's actually how I build these MOGRTs. I actually have a sample logos folder here, so if I just grab one of them, bring it in and scale it up, I'll make sure it's continuously rasterized and disable the other logo, I can just test out various graphics to make sure that a variety of logos look right and help me identify any issues that might happen for anyone who downloads this template. You know, not everybody has the same style logo as me, so I try to test it on as many things as I can to make sure that it's going to work as universally as possible on each one of the looks. I want to make sure that every look looks good no matter what graphic gets put into it. But what I really like about this whole process is being able to just play with the template and see how much control I can give the user, but also optimizing it so that I'm not overwhelming somebody who's not used to all of these complex controls. I want to give as much flexibility as possible while still making it as accessible as possible to the user. So in this case, I added in these different style controls, but I also gave the ability to change how the animation resolves. So if I go back into the global controls, this next option is the final animation section, and it's set to logo only. So that's why we're only seeing the logo. But I also have the option to slide the logo left or slide the logo up. So if we say slide logo left, and you see I've got a little animation that the logo lands and then website.com comes in, or whatever you want to type in there. It doesn't have to be that, but if we go into our text controls, right here's a text field. I could change this to jakeinmotion.com and that will update. And we can even change the font. All these controls will show up inside of Premiere for the editor. And while it is a little bit more technical and involved with expressions, getting all these things to work so that they're kind of universal and they update and size correctly, that is kind of a nice break from being creative all the time. I actually really enjoy taking a break from the actual design and animation and focusing on technical problems for a while because I don't have to be so creative visually. I'm problem solving. I'm making sure that all of my code is working so that however the user changes these controls, the resulting animation and design will look the way that they want it to. So after I've done all of my coding in After Effects, everything's set up the way that it should be in the Essential Graphics panel, I'll then just export this, bring it into Premiere, and then test it out there basically the same way I would here, where I swap out different logos. I test all of my controls that I've built in and make sure that they respond correctly, and basically just troubleshoot, trying to think of as many scenarios as I can that a potential user might run into. And once I'm happy with the way that everything is looking and I don't think there are any issues, then I'm ready to export that MOGRT and I can share it or even upload it on Adobe stock.
And we're back and welcoming to the stream, Jake Bartlett. Jake, that video was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to hang out with you guys.
Well, the pleasure is ours, and we got a lot of questions around all of this cool stuff. And I thought, again, kind of in the spirit of origin stories too, we're always on these streams kind of looking for ways to, inspire others to get into the kind of work that you're doing. And we were all commenting earlier that we all love your logo. How did you get involved in this, and where did you kind of start with sort of motion graphics? And I know you mentioned like Photoshop and stuff like that, but what was kind of the origin of getting into all of this for you?
Yeah, I actually was very fortunate to get into Adobe products at a very early age because my oldest brother, he's 7, 8 years older than me. So he came home from college in the summers and showed me Photoshop, and he showed me After Effects. And thanks to Andrew Kramer, I learned how to make lightsabers. And
yes.
that was kind of the, the hook, line, and sinker of everybody's origin story for After Effects. But so even like early high school is when I started getting into things. Later in high school, I started thinking motion design seems pretty fun. So I was focusing on After Effects and Premiere. And after I graduated with just a digital media degree, I knew I wanted to be an editor or a motion designer, and I ended up getting a job as a motion designer. So for 5 years, I worked at a production company as a generalist. I did a little bit of everything, not just motion design, but I ran a camera, editing, all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, I went freelance, and along the lines of those couple of years, I also started teaching, and that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years, pretty much full time, is teaching people how to use After Effects and how to create animations and and just be motion designers. So I do that on Skillshare, and at School of Motion, I built a couple courses for them.
That's awesome. So, again, one of the things that I think is really cool about what you're doing and what you've done with the MOGRTs that we showcased is always kind of leveraging the latest technologies. And so one of the things that I think would be cool is like, how have MOGRTs and the Essential Graphics panel changed things for you, not only as an instructor, but as a creator yourself, in terms of just the usability and the ease of creating these things and really making them reusable and flexible and accessible versus the way you did it, what did we say, pre-2017 when MOGRTs came out or something? Like, prior to this period, how different was it without the Essential Graphics panel and MOGRTs for doing this same kind of work?
Yeah, that was night and day when this all came to be, because when I was still working at a production company, I was making lower thirds, for show packages and things. And anytime the editor needed a change, they came to me. I had to re-render, export it with alpha, and make sure that everything's lined up and working correctly. And then, oh, there was a typo, got to redo that render. And then I remember the first time that I saw you can change the text in Premiere. I was like, why didn't I have that 2 years ago? Like, that would have saved so much time. And just that simple being able to change text in Premiere was huge.
Right.
Ever since then, like Victoria's already said, like the biggest request has always been drag and drop media replacement. And I knew as soon as that happened, like MOGRTs were going to just be the thing for motion designers, especially working with teams, but not only that, also being able to make stock templates. It's so accessible in that sense. Because like I said in my video, I can work like I always do inside of After Effects. I can make my motion design whatever I want it to be. I can turn it into a template as simply as just dragging the controls that I want to give the editor into that Essential Graphics panel. And then in Premiere, it just works. It's very rare that I go to test something in Premiere and find out that something isn't working. It's usually my fault because of an expression or something. It's not the MOGRT's fault. So yeah, it's just, I think that the media replacement feature specifically is kind of like the last big step that everybody was waiting for. And now that it's here, it's just completely made the whole process seamless between After Effects and Premiere.
And I love what you just said about the fact that it actually hasn't changed what you create. In other words, you're still creating, you're making your comps in the same way. The difference is now there's just more flexibility, again, courtesy of the guys and gals who did our UX and UI and the team that just made that so easy to understand. That's the big difference. But you didn't have to relearn something to make MOGRTs. You didn't have to relearn a process or learn something totally new to do this. You just have a couple new panels to make things a lot faster, a lot better, a lot easier for you.
That's exactly right. And I'd say the most you need to learn if you're not up to date on is just the basics of expressions, just so you understand what's happening. Most of the time, I'm just using the expression pick whip to drag and drop to link properties together. But if you have just a very fundamental level knowledge of expressions, you can do a lot of stuff really easily. It's not that complicated. And I did not know that you guys would be able to bring my projects back into After Effects. So thank goodness that I was organized.
Yeah, we had some notes for you, Jake.
We will see blue solid 32.
That is actually a really great part of the stock templates, though, is that it does force you to really think about how clean can I work and how streamlined can I make this to optimize it for rendering, inside of Premiere. It really makes you think and try to be organized.
And I imagine as a motion designer too, I mean, we've all seen, various YouTube videos. I mean, I've seen them, with people teaching various expressions and things, and you look at these comps and they're just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of layers, many of which are you can tell they're like not, they're collapsed or they're not being used. They're just in there because they tried something and left it. Being more efficient, this whole process of creating MOGRTs it makes you want to be more efficient. To Dacia's points, that you can kind of keep things a bit leaner, and to your point, more easy to understand if you're breaking them down, revealing them afterwards. Like, okay, I can totally follow what's going on here versus just having, it's the classic Photoshop file where everything is layer 1, layer 0. very difficult to figure it out and understand, right? And
don't do it.
Yeah, don't say no to layer 0. Right.
It goes back to the essential graphics panel. It's the idea is that's what's essential. You're declaring these are the things I care about. These are the things that are important. And even if you're not exporting as a MOGRT, you can still store the stuff you're changing frequently or need to access on a regular basis in the panel. Just use it as like a little control surface for After Effects. You can use it to navigate. And then when you're ready to export a template, click export.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Yeah, and I will just plug, I just want to shout out, Jake Bartlett was my first After Effects instructor.
Yes.
On Skillshare.com is how
That's awesome.
I got After Effects demystified for me. And so if you guys are feeling curious, I mean, there's so many good Jake Bartlett resources out there. Seriously, go check it out. Learn from the pro.
Yes. Oh, that's so cool. All right. Well, we've got just a couple more. We've got another minute or so here. This is a little bit off topic, but I know there have been some discussions around multi-frame rendering, Victoria. I don't know if we can talk to any of that, but Josh Dorward was asking any preview guidance on how much faster MFR will be.
It's going to depend on your hardware. That's the short version. We have an amazing benchmark project, which Kyle, I think, should be particularly proud of. He actually did that for us. I see that he's in the YouTube chat right now. Yeah. Awesome job on that. It's gorgeous project. It's just a really beautiful piece of motion design, but it's also designed to tell you how fast is your system going to be in a lot of different contexts. And so what we're seeing is on lower end machines, at the minimum, we're seeing like 1.2x, but once you get higher end, it's up 3x and even beyond that. So we're seeing some really big benefits depending on your hardware, and we're going to continue to optimize things. So what we really need is users to go to our public beta, try out the benchmark project, try out their own projects, see what kind of results they're getting, and let us know, especially if you're seeing something that isn't faster or you're running into any issues. We've had a couple things that people reported and we were able to fix in a matter of days. So our beta updates every single day, and it's going to keep getting better, and multi-frame rendering is going to come to MOGRTs. So that's one of the things we're looking forward to in the future is not only are you going to benefit in the After Effects render queue, but in preview, in Media Encoder, and when you're rendering MOGRTs in Premiere Pro. So it's expanding out.
That is so awesome. So
I'm
awesome.
really excited about it.
I'm so excited.
Everyone, I want to thank you all for joining me. Jake, especially, thank you so much for joining us, for being part of the Adobe family and sharing your awesomeness, your brilliance, and your teaching skills with the world. Anywhere where people can find you, Instagram, YouTube, where I know you mentioned Skillshare and whatnot. Where else can people find you on the interwebs?
Yep, you can find me basically anywhere on social at Jake in Motion, including YouTube. Skillshare / Jake Bartlett. I'm all around.
School of Motion.
School of Motion.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Terrific. All right. Well, everyone, thank you again so much for joining. You will, of course, be able to watch the replays on YouTube and the Adobe Video Facebook page. So until next time, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.